For me, accomplishing any task and accomplishing it well is all about momentum. If I tackle the most challenging, stimulating parts of something first, and then I'm left with only small, tedious, meaningless tasks that still are required for the finished product, I'm probably not going to get around to doing those things in a timely fashion, if ever. Maintaining that momentum and that stimulation is crucial for me. Maybe it is for you too. For that reason, I like to look at the things where the momentum is stalling in any task I do and try to think of the bare minimum that I can do to accomplish that in the fastest and most efficient way possible so I can get back to the good stuff. I'm Skylar the ADHDM, and today I want to help us do as little boring work as possible. I run a lot of theater of the mind these days because it takes less time and effort, and I'm busier than ever, and I do not feel awesome when we have to figure out how many monsters are in range of the fireball, or if this wall of potion ingredients is close enough for the barbarian to smash it with her throwing axe and cause an unstable reaction. My instinct, and the instinct of many people, is just to hand wave it and say yes or no based on a gut feeling or really loose interpretation, and I usually go with that instinct because I like stories, and I don't want to break the action and drama to ask boring questions. But these questions should have answers, and my ability to clearly hold images in my mind is about a 3 out of 10, so things like consistent spatial awareness and object permanence are a pain to hold on to. Maybe you've already seen my mapping video. In it, I talk about foregoing an actual map and instead just creating our locations, deciding how far apart they are in an abstract sense, and filling in the in-between spaces as needed. And I really tend to do stuff like that for every part of games. And unless we're in a situation where someone is trying to do something really noodly and specific, it doesn't cost any fun or drama to loosen things up. For instance, in combat, I really only ever see 3 types of targets. There's someone adjacent, there's someone near enough to move up to, there's someone far enough that it needs to be a ranged attack, and someone too far away for normal ranged attacks. Looking at the natural language that we just used to describe that, we have our combat ranges: adjacent, nearby, far, and too far. If it's adjacent, reach out and touch it. If it's nearby, walk there or throw your short-ranged weapon. If it's far, shoot it with a bow or range spell. If it's too far, shoot it with your bow at disadvantage. Cast Fireball on faraway goblins. Most of them are adjacent to one another, but one is only nearby the others. The adjacent ones get toasted, the nearby one doesn't. And then we don't have to spend 3 minutes calculating the perfect center of the fireball. It might not fit all the needs at every single table, what rule does, but it does give me a sense of spatial awareness and proximity that is consistent and simple, instead of just guessing and hand-waving and inviting continuity errors through the faults of my neurochemistry. There are other rules that I think are awesome to use in theory. They fit my fantasy of playing the game, but in reality they're too cumbersome to apply consistently. Encumbrance is very appropriately cumbersome to track. I cannot do anything to make myself care about how many pounds of candles someone is carrying. Encumbrance as written also doesn't hold up if you imagine characters actually carrying those things. I can, however, steal from Borg and say, alright, the golden idol is heavy. You have room for 1 heavy thing in your bag. The party has room for 4 heavy things or 2 very heavy things in the wagon. You can carry 8 plus your strength score in light things. There could be things that aren't heavy, strictly speaking, but are still cumbersome, so we'll say, okay, this long sword is 2 light things. So is this big shield. Now I can use encumbrance rules without opening the player's handbook to see how much a rope weighs. Even shitty rope is insanely light, by the way, so the player's handbook is crazy for making it weigh 10 pounds. Passage of time is also hard for me to track in real life, let alone in a game where 18 seconds of fighting a bugbear can be 5 minutes of conversation and decision making. Unless I've recruited a player at the table to be the timekeeper, I usually lose track at some point during the session and end up guessing. So instead of that, I can say, you are able to prop the stone door open after a few minutes of hard work. There is no reason for me to advance an actual clock to track that, but if there are bad guys nearby, then that is a time when they might happen upon the party, so it's significant to note. I can then put a tick in a box that I've labeled a few minutes. If I look down and see a bunch of those ticks, I can reasonably approximate how much time has passed. The next interval that is usable is long enough for a short rest. The use case there is obvious. The next one after that is a few hours. Finally, after that, we have long enough for a long rest. So as the party is exploring and solving problems and moving heavy stuff around, however they're passing their time, I look down, and if I wrote that they left at midday and there are 4 ticks in my few minutes box, 2 in my long enough for a short rest, and 1 in my a few hours box, I can confidently say that it's mid-afternoon without falling victim to the folly of dilated role-playing game time perception. Food and ammunition are among the very first things that any new dungeon master stops tracking almost immediately because it's tedious, and they're usually in 3 categories. We have plenty, we are low on it, or we have none. Unless we're talking about magic arrows or heroes' feasts, there's no reason to know exactly how many arrows or days of rations are left. But if we let the players know they're running low, these resources that used to have a binary setting of let's track them obsessively or let's ignore them entirely, now have enough ambiguity to allow us to use them narratively. Going into enemy territory low on arrows is tense. Camping in the wilderness low on food means we better find a way to get plenty again soon, or we're gonna go hungry. Most of the resources players and DMs are given to track have little to no rules, consequence, or payoff. There is no benefit for tracking them well, and there is only penalty for errors or for losing track, so they tend to get ignored or guessed. There's no need to completely eliminate traditional resource management either, when it serves a purpose. We can contrast our abstract tracking with precise tracking for extremely limited or significant resources. The mage has all the spell components she needs, either hand-waved in the pouch, or we can deduct gold for the named ones. I do not care at all whether or not the mage bought a pearl to cast Identify. We can just spend the gold pieces. What I do care about is the new scrolls she scribed in the dungeon that will let her cast Summon Undead. So now the material component of a gilded skull is mentioned in that very scroll, and we learn that it is atop the black staff of the late necromancer Vermog the Withered, and none have dared enter his tomb to the south. And the ranger only has 2 arrows of green dragon slaying, and that specific knowledge isn't going to bog us down any, it's going to add tension. Those are chances to do the impossible. So when we're sitting in the game and looking around and realizing this is a moment that everyone is looking at their phone or going through a ton of steps to figure out how the rules are applying in this instant, it might be a pretty good opportunity to take a look at that rule and decide how much of it we really need to move things forward. If you have any rules that you've made more abstract or resources that you track in minimal and creative ways, please let me know. I want to thank my Antediluvian Lurker and Dungeon Delver tier patrons, Adam M, IronTrash, Troy, Borkware, Courtney Monster, M, Mitch B, Paige Enby Witch, Raspilicious, Sam, Shawn S, Shawn M. Thank you all so very much, and thank you for watching.